when I first got here, there were different people in different positions, and we had our own hot food service, but it was very expensive.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, if we want to serve the students properly without and remaining financially accessible, I can't keep doing this. But I also knew the person that was in charge of the food, she was awesome at billing. That was her niche. That's what she loved doing. She liked billing. I didn't have a billing person. So I moved her to billing, and I actually outsourced our food program because there's two things that come out of that. One, we're able to serve the kids better. The parents actually have a choice in what the food they're getting. So now it's healthier food. Sometimes, they'll get some junk food once in a while, depending on what the parents order. And on top of that, I have a billing person that can help serve our families when they have questions about the tuition. So now all of this was a service mindset. On top of that, when we say we're being Christ-centered, that means we are good stewards of what we're doing for our families.
Welcome to the podcast. We talk a lot about leadership and culture on this show. But what if school's culture wasn't something that you had to manufacture? What if it was built on deeply shared pre-existing belief system? Today, we are exploring a different model of leadership with Marc Popovici, head of school at Schaumburg Christian School, a community built on foundation of shared conviction. Marc, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be a really fun conversation. It's something I do enjoy talking about.
I would first want to start with how did you end up here? Because your journey is so fantastic. And what motivated you towards education?
Well, education has always been something on my heart. Since sixth grade with Mr. Gabriel, there was a specific incident where it just triggered. I want to be in education. I did explore law at one point. That was not something I wanted to do. I did one shadow day with somebody and I said, never again. This is not what I want. So I fell back on education, but it's really just part of the family legacy I have. My grandfather ran a seminary. He was a pastor. I have two uncles that are pastors, a father that was a Sunday school teacher and a choir director. For us, education is not necessarily about teaching. It's about discipleship, which really gets to the heart of what we're doing here at the school and really gets to the heart of the individual. And that's where, for me, my journey really started, and that's what I believe in.
And it kind of shows, because the other question that I have is that you moved across from a public school district to a Catholic school. So how has that journey been?
By God's grace, that was something that me and my wife did not anticipate. I loved being in the public school. I loved coaching. I loved everything there I was doing. There was just something missing. And I went into the public education because I wanted to be a testimony. I wanted to bring the gospel to all my students there. But then, I don't know, so I felt something was missing. So we started exploring other things. And one day we attended Schaumburg Christian is a ministry of Bethel Baptist Church. And we moved in the area. My wife and I attended the church just to visit. I was kind of tired. I was remodeling the house, coaching, working. I needed something closer to home. And my wife said, there's a school here. Why don't you apply? And I did. I actually forgot I applied to the school, got an interview, got hired. Long story short, the head of school ended up moving out, and then the senior pastor called and asked if I'd be interested. It's just by God's grace, honestly. And I remember sitting in the interview with the staff, and he was center aisle, 3 rows from the front, and the teacher got up and said, "Listen, if this head of school can leave," and he opened the door for him to leave and opened the door for Mark to come, I'm good. And that was kind of the first time I really saw God's hand on all of this, and I really felt it, and I felt it ever since. And that's, for me, what drove me to Christian education and really dive into what it means to be in Christian education and why we're here.
And I think that's a great segue into what I want to ask you next, because when you are into a Christian education, there's already a culture which is defined. There's, the Bible's already written down, there's gospel and there's truth around that. So when you look at from a staff member, when you look at from a student, even parent, everyone shares the same mission, a biblical worldview. How does it reflect in building culture? How does it reflect compared to, say, something which was public school, right? Like it was a lot different. So what's the differences that you saw?
Oh, that's a good question. And those are things that I've really focused on my first year here was really looking at what made the public schools so popular. We live in Illinois. It's not school choice, so parents literally they choose to come here paying tax dollars and they're paying tuition. So they're paying, it's a sacrifice for them to be here. Why are they here? And I always said this, public schools don't need to sell themselves or market themselves well, but they do. Private schools a lot of times don't because they can't afford it. They can't. So you're really getting the people that want to be here. And that's what made the culture so awesome here. It was a true community of people that wanted to invest in their children and invest in the staff and the programs here. The big difference between the public school and the private school is that on a teacher level or an administrative level, we really care about walking alongside our teachers. We care about walking alongside our families. When we talk about being student centered and student focused, that can't happen unless we introduce and bring in the families. And that's where when the family and we have the church and we have the school, when all three of us working together for the betterment of the child and he is at the center of our efforts, they will benefit the most. And that's where, for me, coming in Christian leadership and then coming in from the public school and seeing how that shift for me was huge. It really shaped how I want to lead our school and how I view Christian education, because that's what needs to be marketed. That's what needs to be showcased, is not necessarily the student success. That stuff comes. Students nowadays are so smart. I mean, when you and I grew up, it was different. Now these kids have so much at their fingertips. They have so much information at their disposal. But it's how do we make sure we nurture them in a way that is God honoring, Christ centered, where they can pursue excellence with purpose and that they can learn how to serve one another in a good way.
And I think the same thing would also help you to move and take decisions a lot faster, because if everyone's mission is aligned, or am I wrong on that? Or does it still take as much time as it would if it was? And I'm also comparing you to a independent school, which is not a Christian,
Yeah.
right? Like someone.
Yeah. I think for us, it does help make decisions go faster, but it also gives us something to fall back on. What's unique at Schaumburg Christian is we are a missional school. So we let anybody come in. We do act very much so like an independent school where anybody can enroll. You don't have to be a Christian. We have a lot of Muslims, Indians, Hindus. We have a couple of Buddhists. And that's the great thing, is they are coming here for the single purpose of us working together for the betterment of their child. We're providing them the biblical worldview, and that's what's huge about it. But it does help us make decisions with the mindset of we are here to disciple them. If there's an issue with a parent and they don't like a decision we made, for us, it's really easy to fall back on, are we being Christ-centered in our decision? Are we pursuing excellence, A, professionally, B, with the parents, and then C, is the student going to be able to pursue excellence in that? And then how are we serving them? I always tell parents, just because we're a Christian school doesn't mean we always say yes, right? For me to serve you the best way, in a Christ-centered way, in a way that helps you pursue excellence, sometimes that is going to be a no. That's going to be a tough conversation, because if I want you to succeed and I want your child to succeed, I do have to say no sometimes, A, to the student coming in, or maybe it's a request, but I have to do what's best for the student and for the overall school. And when you really just be clear about the values, when you're clear about how you make decisions, it does make everybody perceive things faster. It makes our discussions faster. It actually makes our discussions more meaningful,
Yeah.
and on point with what we're trying to do. And especially when it comes with parents, we asked a few kids to leave over the course of my 3 years here. I've been here for 3 years, and this is the start of my fourth. And when we're clear with the expectations, and that we're not necessarily asking a student to leave because they don't fit us, it's because we can't necessarily service them the way that will help them grow the most. It's a lot easier for them to understand it, and I will say that is a much more Christ-centered way, and a much more way of us helping them pursue excellence.
Can you share an example for the same?
Yeah, so there was a student, they came in from the public school. They really struggled with behavior. They just Schaumburg Christian is not like other schools. We're very rigorous. We're very rigid. We have expectations, and some of the kids don't meet those expectations, and that's okay. So we every new kid comes in, we put them on a probation. We kind of monitor them over the course of a quarter. We speak with them. We meet with make sure we talk to the parents. Good positive communication. And one of the student just wasn't doing well. He just was not, and we found out he had some learning disabilities that we could not service. We just couldn't. So I literally called up the public school again and said, "Hey, what did you do? And it became difficult for us to service the student here. He could not pursue excellence at Schaumburg Christian because of the disabilities, because we are not equipped for it. So that we just had to tell the parent, hey, sorry, we can't. I know you want to be a part of our environment. We know you want to be part of our culture, but I cannot help you fulfill the values we have here. Another example is there was a family touring the school. They loved it. They want to be a part of it. We interviewed them. It was great. Then I looked at where they're driving. It was a 45-minute drive for the student every single day. And it wasn't a highway drive. It was a street 45 minutes, which in wintertime is way worse than anything else. I did the math. I figured out how much it would cost them. I called a private school close to them that we align with that are very similar to us. We basically ended up sending the kid to the other private school because I don't need the kid leaving home at 6:30 in the morning to make sure he's here on time. And then he wants to play sports and now he's getting home late, staying up late to do homework. That's not benefiting him. And that's not benefiting the family and the relationship that he has with his family. So we just couldn't accept them because of that.
And I'm guessing a lot of these dissents, which you were saying, right? And like this culturally, when you have to say no, doesn't really affect because of the mission. It's all because of pure academic and for the excellence of the child reasons. That's where you take your calls.
Yeah. And the mission of Schaumburg Christian School is to prepare each student for a successful life.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is the no, right? So even if they're not going to be here, I am going to make sure they're set up for a successful life. And that might not necessarily be because they came to Schaumburg Christian. It might actually be because I said no and they couldn't attend here for whatever reason. It could be behavioral. It could be academic. It could be spiritual. It could be something that didn't align with us. And we say no to those things. It could be political views. It could be a bunch of different reasons. But I want to make sure all our students are set up for success. And we'll do everything in our power until we get to a certain point. Because when the student starts to get negatively impacted on their education, then we can't service them. We can't help them. They're not going to learn. They're not going to grow. We're not setting them up for success. And that's when it's an easy decision for us.
I mean, one of the major things that takes in for student success is also the teachers that you hire and the ones who are aligned. So what's your hiring and even firing, right? Like one of the things that is allowed in an independent school is that you can fire them if they're not performing to the standards which you have set, which are rigorous and there's certain levels which parents and the whole community is expecting out of.
Oh, yeah.
So
we do have a good hiring process and we're constantly evaluating it. We're constantly reviewing it. We try to hire out as early as possible, but we first interview the teacher, then we put them through a lesson, then we interview them again. And we hired a history teacher this year, but for his in-person lesson, we actually had him teach math, something completely out of the ballpark for him, out of his comfort zone. He didn't do well, right? He's not a math guy. He's a history person. I'm a history person. You never want me teaching math ever to anybody. But the key takeaways was, how did he react to it? Yeah. How did he dive into it? Was he all in on teaching math? And I'm not saying I intentionally put him in math, but it just so happened that was the class that was available that day. He can come in. And I also look at how he reacts to the post interview. How is he discussing his lesson to us, knowing he didn't do his best? Was he reflective? Did he have that hunger for wisdom that is part of our, I would say, teacher workings, right? Our teacher values. We have this idea of the heart, and the first H is hunger for wisdom from Mark Miller, who's a brilliant leadership guy. And one of the things that we love, one of the things that we love is we are constantly working on. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call or something went in. I don't know. Did you hear that?
Nothing, all good.
Oh, okay. There was another voice on my speaker here. Sorry about that. Um, so one of the things that we always talk about is we want to see how their hunger for wisdom is on a new teacher. How are they learning? And we give a lot of grace their first year here. We'll walk in their classrooms a lot. We have mentors for them after they go through our rigorous hiring process. But if we really see that they don't align with us, or they're not in the right place, can I move them first into the right place where they'll be successful? Or do I have to just say, sorry, this is not the right place for you, right? And that's okay too. Letting them go, as long as we run through our process of for them to grow. If we don't see growth or we don't anticipate growth from them in the next year, that's okay, right? Just like for a lot of things, there are things here that will take time. It takes change. Our school year is very rigorous. It's very fast paced. Can the teacher keep up? We have a lot of teachers, their second year, tremendous growth from their first year because, I have a teacher here. He taught in the public school for 30 years and he came over here when he retired. He said this is the most rigorous thing he's ever done in his 30 years. It was hard his first year. Second year, it was a breeze because he's used to it. Right. So it's all the supports that we put around them. And if they don't meet that hunger for wisdom or the supports around them, then that's okay. We got to let them go. I'm not afraid to do it because I want the best for our staff member just as much as I want the best for our students, just as much as I want the best for our families. And if I can't support the teacher in their success, they can't support the student and they can't support the parent.
A couple of great wisdom points from that whole place. So I have to tell you, I'm a maths teacher. So I have been
Oh,
so when you said
I,
it, I was just like, oh wow, it would have been right across my alley. But had I had
yeah.
history, it would have just been like, oh wow.
Yeah, you wouldn't know what to do. It different techniques, different styles. But you can see the history teacher in him because sometimes history teachers some of them are a little bit more animated.
Yeah.
You saw that in his math lesson, but you could tell he just had no idea. Praying nobody would ask him a question, and that's fine. That's how I am when I would go in a math class. Yeah, I just don't ask me any questions because I'll need to Google it or something.
And this is another thing which I have to ask, right? Because and this is something which that also came to my mind was because you've been here for your fourth year now. There must be teachers
Mhm.
which have been there for 25 years or 30 years, have been in the system for way longer. They're
Yeah,
both, and they must be extremely cultural fit for a lot of different leaders, and they have stayed for that long, and the school loves them. Maybe the families love them.
yeah.
But how do they adapt to the changing times? And from there, how do you look at the whole innovation or the culture and what's happening around the world?
I think when you have a teacher that's been here a long time, you really have to explain why we're changing. Uh, we've made some in my 4 years here. We've made about 45 different changes or projects that we've completed to kind of enhance the school, which is a pretty good amount.
Yeah,
And I would say even a lot of those, we didn't do any of those in my first year. Those all came after I learned everything, and I just kind of observed for a year. One of the things that I loved about making those changes with those longtime teachers was sitting down with them and talking to them about it and hearing their perspective and getting them to buy into it. Because sometimes me making a change, because we're preschool through 12th grade, so there's a lot of age ranges there. Some of the changes realistically might not impact a 3-year-old teacher, but they'll impact a high school teacher.
true.
Well, making sure it's balanced, making sure that the preschool teacher understands we're making this change for the high school, but also at the same time, it brings clarity. And when we have clarity, things happen easier. Things are much more efficient. for the teacher to do their job, or for the student to learn, or for the parent to be engaged. So bringing that up ahead of time and really walking people onto that and giving them a runway into the change has really helped. Sometimes change didn't happen because of manpower. Okay, let's get the manpower to make the changes. Let's get the individuals in the right places to make the changes. And that also helps because you have somebody dedicated to it that's going to go to their fullest for the glory of God in that change, and they're going to make sure it's implemented correctly. We switched over programs for our students this past year, and if you know that's a big system. I mean, you're changing a lot of different things, and we're asking teachers that typically didn't use the system to use the system. It's scary for them. It's different, but different doesn't always mean bad. Different just means different.
Yeah.
It could be a good different. And right now, a lot of them are saying, this is great. This is actually nice. I can see the information about the kid. I have access to information. So I think just letting them know that change is not bad. Changes could be good for us. And it's also okay admitting for me as the leader when I'm wrong, when I make a change. There was a change a few years ago that I did that did not go over well. In my brain, best thing in the world, right? It's amazing. It just wasn't the right thing for us, and it's okay. I backpedaled, not in a bad way, and I admitted I was wrong. I admitted that it was not a good change for us. And then there's some times where we have to make change with discernment, with godly wisdom, and we have to make that change. Just me as the head of school has to make it without discussing it and saying, this is the direction we're going in. And then there's those changes where, hey, let's have that discussion over the course of 6 months so we can implement it in a year and be 13 months out on a change. But giving us that runway definitely helps. Yeah. And with the teachers that have been here a long time, they do like it. They're like, this is good. They feel energized. When you give them the runway and the information about a change, there's energy, there's excitement, which then goes down to the students and then back up to the parents.
And when you look at from a perspective of this change and innovation that comes in, right? You said you got in a new LMS system for the students' data to be shown across.
Yeah.
So when you think of, and this is something which I'm going to come in, because a strong cultural and even a biblical view gives you a answer to what to do and what not to do, because it's a decision making matrix, which is so do you generally run everything through it? And can you give me an example of a curriculum you implemented which fit half of the criteria but not fit enough, or something which fit completely, right? Like something which you're using right now and you can share with us that has worked amongst so many projects that you have done.
That failed or succeeded?
Your choice. I'm going to let you.
Okay. So I'll say, so there is one thing that I will say that I would say is a success. When I first got here, there were different people in different positions, and we had our own hot food service, but it was very expensive.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, if we want to serve the students properly without and remaining financially accessible, I can't keep doing this. But I also knew the person that was in charge of the food, she was awesome at billing. That was her niche. That's what she loved doing. She liked billing. I didn't have a billing person. So I moved her to billing, and I actually outsourced our food program because there's two things that come out of that. One, we're able to serve the kids better. The parents actually have a choice in what the food they're getting. So now it's healthier food. Sometimes, they'll get some junk food once in a while, depending on what the parents order. And on top of that, I have a billing person that can help serve our families when they have questions about the tuition. So now all of this was a service mindset. On top of that, when we say we're being Christ-centered, that means we are good stewards of what we're doing for our families. So we were not being good stewards by having kind of no billing person with not a specific billing person that would help them answer the right questions, food that was good but could be better and can take a workload off. So now just moving people around helps us really achieve what we want to do. And that was a big part, right? Me as a school leader, I have to be the best steward of my staff possible. Well, this past year, we hired a director of HR, which we didn't have before. It was me and my administrative assistant doing all that work. I'm not an HR person, just like you're not a history teacher and I'm not a math teacher. I know the HR laws, I know what we're supposed to
Yeah.
do, but the ins and outs of all of that's a lot. So we hired an HR person to best steward or serve our staff so we can allow them to pursue excellence in a Christ-centered way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one of the other questions which I do have is, when you look to lead a school or a company or even a nonprofit, what is the most important lesson that you've learned about from the benefits and the burdens of leading a school? What's something which you would give out as an advice that, hey, this is what you need to do, the first step in?
Well, I would say the first step is always just observe, take notes, ask the right questions, don't rush into change. The second step, I would say, is surround yourself with the right people. If you have the right team that has the right heart, and that want to serve and that want to care for other individuals, things will happen a lot faster with the right change than you probably would have been able to do on your own. And then the third thing is build a good routine, build good home life. Make sure the home life balance is solid. I'm very thankful for my wife and the home that we have. You know, I can come home and I know I can unwind. I know I can work. I know I can do other things at home and be a good husband, where it's not always Schaumburg Christian School, Schaumburg Christian School. And she does a very good job of making sure that it's not my life.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where that's that second where you have that team that really builds around you. Your family is a part of that as well. So
I know you mentioned this. Now that you have, one of the things which I do ask, how do you balance the homework which you give out versus, I know it's something completely away, but the reason I'm asking that is, for a kid's life, I think
mhm.
balancing it out for students is also as important as for adults. And I
Oh,
can
absolutely.
get it. So how do you
Yeah.
balance it out? Because it's a rigorous school and you guys do so much.
Right. That is a very good question. It's actually something we're reviewing this year. Time. How does our time reflect our values or enforce our values? If we want to give kids a Christ-centered environment where they can pursue excellence, how does time at Schaumburg Christian School or at home even help them pursue excellence? Just a few of the policies we do have in place is there's no homework on Wednesday nights. No homework at all, right? There's usually churches that meet on Wednesday nights. There's something. And we also stagger when tests can take place or when projects are due. So a kid's not going to have 8 tests in one day. Now, can they? Yeah, but they have to get kind of approval from their principal. But that's one way we make sure the kids are able to also be kids, because that's something you want from them. You want them to go outside and play.
Yeah.
Um, we've talked about just even how we change our schedule next year. What does that look like? What does it look like to have block schedules versus a regular period schedule? All of those things play an influence on their pursuit of excellence.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. I think this was wonderful. But I do have one last thing that we normally ask, which is something which the last school leader, has given to us. And one of the questions they asked us was, what are the some of, because they were grappling with this and we had
Yeah.
conversation. What are some of the steps that you have taken to implement AI in your school? Because AI is everywhere, and I know you are a technologist, so I think, and you have taken that hat once before.
This might be an unpopular comment or it might be a very popular comment. It's kind of an interesting one. We're actually doing the opposite. Um, we are actually going away from technology to a certain extent. So from preschool through 8th grade, the kids do not have Chromebooks or tablets. Everything is pen and paper, which is great. We're teaching them how to interact with what they're learning, both with their hands, their minds. Our English classes in high school are actually going away from Chromebooks, and we're going to do more actual reading, and they're going to start handwriting their essays, just to let them be more creative. I AI for me has been great. Don't get me wrong. It's it's such a good tool. I pumped in our last 10, 15 years of enrollment, asked for a trend and analyze it, and it did it all for me, and it was fantastic. It would have taken me hours to do that. It did it for me in 30 seconds. But for our students, we want them to be creative. AI is a tool, but when AI starts to take over our nature and starts to take over our capabilities, that's when it's an issue. So we want to make sure we teach our students to use it appropriately at the right times and not always, so that way it doesn't take over what they're learning or doing. So we want our kids to be more creative with it. But also we want our kids to be more creative, period. And that's part of just, hey, you know what? Let's take it back a step. We're like one of the only schools in the area that still teach cursive in second grade. And that's huge. Parents love that. We love that because your brain works. There's so much data out there that shows that cursive is healthy for kids to learn. So let's teach it. I don't need them typing away on a computer screen. It's not good for their eyes. It's not good for their brains. It's not good for their relational skills. So having our kids be relational with their environment is such an important thing that we're trying to do. So when it comes to implementing AI, we're kind of making sure we're keeping AI at a very, very long arm's reach, and having our kids interact with what they're learning with a pen and paper, right? Our brains are very powerful. It's amazing how God created us. So that's something where we want our students to really interact with that.
That sounds, as you rightly said, one side or the other. Because
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody's going to send me an email about how you're not using AI and how we should be doing it. And then somebody's going to say, good for you.
yeah,
So it's a polarizing conversation.
for sure. And I think there is merits to both ends of it. I think
Hmm.
there's merits to the fact of using it because that prepares them for what's coming in the future. And there's
Yeah.
merits
100%.
to just being creative and seeing what the side effects of it will look like. So why
Yeah.
throw them in the deep end without having that figured out?
Oh, that's a great analogy. I would want to make sure the kid knows how to swim and can tread water before throwing him in the deep end. AI is such a powerful tool. You also have to know what to ask it. You have to give it the right instructions. And if you're letting it do all the work for you, what are you actually doing? So that's, again, part of the conversation all the time. So I do appreciate our English teachers and our reading teachers for saying, let's do more with reading and writing physically. And we can eventually teach them how to use AI. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with teaching a kid how to use tools responsibly, just like, you learn how to use a hammer so not to hit your thumb. It's the same concept.
For sure. Though this is something which I would want to leave it uh, and your views to it. I think one of the most powerful ways AI can be used is for teachers, not even for students right
Hmm.
now. Because
Oh yeah.
take the administrative task, and I'm sure you did it with your data, but they can do it
Yeah.
for lesson planning, they can do it for personalization. Even if there's a student who's at grade 8 but their reading level is at grade 6 or grade 7, they can create
Right.
that passage in that manner. It just allows you to do things which it wouldn't. I think that's one of the biggest pros of AI right now.
Oh yeah. And I would totally encourage a teacher to say, going off your example, I have a kid at an eighth grade reading level. What are some strategies for me to give him in the classroom to help him at their reading level, or provide an assignment that'll help them? Those are things that will definitely help, especially when you think about Christian schools that might not always get the strongest teachers or the best teachers because we don't pay as much as the public schools do. Um, AI can be a tool for them on helping differentiate their learning capabilities. So there's so much AI can do uh, for the teachers, but for the students, I think it's our job to also protect them to a certain extent from AI, so they can grow in their excellence and they can grow in their knowledge and their skills before they start using it. I use the analogy with a hammer. If a kid can't pick up a hammer, I'm not going to give it to him because he's going to hit himself over the head because he can't hold it, or he's going to drop it on their toe or something. So we have to be cautious of that. We have to be mindful of those things.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was an absolute pleasure.